do I have the pleasure of interviewing today?
Hi, Jessica. It's Judith Katz with the Khalil Jameson Consulting Group. Great to see you. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I have started all these conversations off with two open-ended concepts. So there's no wrong answer, but I'm really fascinated how different all the answers are based on all of our different experiences. So the first open-ended concept question is about diversity dividend. So when you think of the term diversity dividend or ROI, not REO Speedwagon, that's different.
Not bad.
ROI on doing diversity and inclusion work, thinking about investment, action, return kind of stuff. What does that mean to you? How does it land on you? What's it make you think about?
It makes me think about our work. So the thing, I mean, for me, our work is about culture change. And we really look at how do you connect diversity and inclusion to the strategy and mission of an organization. And we've been really successful and experienced in really connecting diversity and inclusion, the culture that we have, how people can bring their differences directly to bottom line results. So for example, in one manufacturing division, they were having a lot of human errors. What they found was the more people were included, the more they went to a range of differences, the more they included the shop floor, that they were actually able to limit the number of human error, increase production, increase quality. And the thing I love is really being able to connect it to the measures that matter for the organization. So, you know, representation is important and all of those things are critical, but really connecting it to bottom line, what is it that we are trying to do here in this organization, and really connecting to the results of that has been enormously effective. And yeah, it's really been incredible. Like when you can look at a graph and say, this is where we started this inclusion and diversity effort, and here's how our results have skyrocketed. Now, we know it's not the only variable, but it's part of the variables, right? And so, to me, it's connecting it directly to that, as well as to look at, can people speak up? What's happening in the culture? What's happening around engagement? What's happening in terms of, you know, turnover? I mean, there are all these measures. Ed Hubbard has done a really good job of looking at a lot of those diversity measures. And, but for us, those are kind of on the HR side and talent side. We like to look also at the business results side. And I think the diversity dividend is connecting both of those elements, not just making diversity be a talent conversation, but really being that results as well. So to me, that's the exciting part.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
So that segues to the next concept question, which is asterisks other duties assigned, which sometimes is at the end of a job description. Sometimes it's what people are volunteered to do based on their identities. And sometimes it's what we volunteer to do because of our identities to feel like we have some sense of community. Asterisks other duties assigned. What's that mean to you?
Oh, I just actually wrote an article about this, so it's really interesting that you would raise this. You know, one of my pet peeves and concerns is that I think people who've been marginalized often get 5 jobs in an organization, and the other duties assigned is not in their performance reviews. So they have to do their job, right? And they have to do it well. So being competent is just like the table stakes, right? It's not the above and beyond. Then I have to speak on behalf of my identity group. So, you know, that person gets rolled out to be the spokesperson. That person gets rolled out to be the mentor. That person gets rolled out to be the diversity, consultant within the organization or sit on the diversity committees. They get to be the ones who do the recruiting and the hiring and all of that stuff. And they also get to be the one who has to make their colleagues comfortable and, you know, prove that they're somehow capable of being there. And I feel like those other duties assigned is like the majority group doesn't have to do all that. They just have to do their jobs and do it well. But for someone who has been a marginalized group or underrepresented group, they get 5 job descriptions, but we're evaluating them on all 5, even though it's never been codified or identified specifically within the job description or acknowledged that they are actually helping the organization achieve its goals around diversity and inclusion or furthering it, because they are paving the way for other people like themselves to be able to feel safe within the organization. So
I would love to read that article. That sounds great.
Yeah, and I think we've overused ERGs, employee resource groups, in some ways. because I think in many organizations, ERGs are taking the responsibility and role that leaders should have around accountability, hiring, recruiting, development, all of that. And, you know, for good reasons of taking it on, safe place for people to be able to express themselves, to be able to be with people who are like-minded. But I feel like in some ways, ERGs are also letting the organization off the hook. And not having leaders take the responsibility that they need to take for all of those duties and responsibilities. So that's part of what I'm like excited about, concerned about, and see about that asterisk, other duties assigned.
Yeah, that's the weird part about our jobs, right? Is that we're really excited about concerns, but yeah.
Well,
all right, great.
Well, we put passion into it, right? That's why we do passion, and we want to make change.
Well, that's a good segue to your work. So in a previous conversation, what I loved about one of the things that you talked about, that how you said it also really differentiates you from the other people I've talked to, which is about the pioneers of diversity change agents versus a trainer or a keynote. What does that mean for you, and how does that show up in your work?
So I've been at this work a long time. I mean, a long time. My initial work was dealing with racism. I wrote a book called White Awareness in 1978, which is still in press. And it was really a landmark book for whites to look at what our responsibility was to deal with racism from a white perspective. And I think that there's a number of us who really have been involved in this work when it had many different names, right? It's gone through racism, sexism, dealing with, heterosexism. It's gone through multiculturalism, all of that. The basic tenet of our work, and it's really what Khalil Jamison, who started our firm in 1970, so, we've been around, this firm's been around a long time, was really about, it's not just about training, it's really about culture change. And, you can bring people in, but if the culture doesn't change, then what we do is we have the revolving door, right? Where we find ourselves that, how much effort is put into hiring, but how much effort is put into attrition. Policies, practices, systems, all of that has to change to really create sustainable change. And so for us, most of our work is really 3 to 5 years in an organization to really look at that systemic change. I mean, so that it's not just about, unconscious bias training, or it's just not about microaggressions. It's really systemically, how do we really shift this organization so that people feel welcomed, valued, a part of, seen, changing what the criteria are for competence, changing what it means to be hired, changing what it means, it's not just about bringing in people of color, for example, we just took that demographic, but it's bringing in whites who have an understanding of diversity and can engage and manage and lead in a diverse workforce.
Right.
So we often only focus on one half of the equation. The issue is, being promoted as a leader, for example, you have to be able to engage and manage a diverse workforce, not just be technically competent. So there's a huge shift. And I think that an understanding who the pioneers are in your organization and really supporting them, because there are a lot of people who are first. It's back to our, asterisk other duties. There are a lot of people who are first in organizations that we're not giving the support that they need to succeed. So as an external, pioneer, but also my goal and my role is to really change that culture so we don't need to have people who have to be the first anymore.
That's awesome. That's so great. That's great. So are you ready for my 2 favorite questions?
Ready for it.
Okay. First favorite question, what have you changed your mind about lately?
Well, this has been a progression that I changed my mind about. When I wrote White Awareness, the world seemed so simple. And in terms of doing this work, I assumed it was like, years ago, it was like, just give people the knowledge and they will change, right? Because good people want to be good. And so, I did not think, just like Gloria Steinem said, she never thought she'd be doing this work in her 70s and 80s, right? So there's a part of me that thought, okay, I'd do this for a little while and I'd move on with life. I didn't think this was going to be life. The second thing, which is related to that, I think, is understanding the cycles of change. So, as someone who's more senior, who's been around for a while, there are times I could get jaded about looking at Me Too and saying, we're having the sexual harassment conversation again. We had that in the 70s. I had it in the 90s. Now we're in 2019. We're having it again. But I also think there's a cycle around this change. Well, Black Lives Matter, when we had the civil rights movement. And understanding each generation has to come about this work in its own way. And I think really honoring that, as opposed to being the fatigue of we're still having this conversation. We're going to have this conversation because we're not dealing with the fundamental issues of oppression in our society. And until we address that, we're going to need the Black Lives Matter of 2015 and whatever it's going to be in 2030 or my granddaughter's generation. So I think that's been, I don't know if it's been a change, but it's definitely been a deepening understanding of this cycle. And, even the civil rights movement was built on the 1920s and the 1800s and all of those people who are fighting injustice, the suffrage movement, et cetera. We're part of a thin red line through history. So that's my response to one of your bonus questions.
Great. So the next bonus question is the exact opposite. What do you absolutely know?
I absolutely know that treating people with respect and honoring who they are and enabling them to have voice is absolutely essential for human beings. And I think everyone wants to be included. I think people want to value and they want to matter. And I think that's the work. I think it's finding and creating spaces where people can be fully who they are in a respectful, loving, and caring way. And, I've worked in a lot of countries, and no matter what country I've been in, everybody wants to be loved. Everybody has joys and fears and sorrows, and we all go from life and death. And I think it may show up differently, but I don't think our motivations or our needs are quite different. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, the issue is uncovering, what is it that you need, Jessica, that may be different from me, but fundamentally there's a need under there of value, respect, dignity that I think needs to be honored.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I got goosebumps. Okay, so icebreaker questions. This is the lightning round. You chose 3 questions that are either easy, intermediate, or deep for my icebreaker cards. So you have to answer them very quickly and off the top of your head. So first one, number 4, is easy. And that is, name the group where you felt the happiest, most integrated, and most accepted.
Wow. Ooh, God. I feel it in my firm. I mean, I have Fred Miller and I have been business partners for 35 years. We've got this incredible partnership. He's an African-American man. I'm a white woman. We have, we fight together. We work together. We've just had, I feel like I can be me, period.
That's awesome. There's so few people who can say that about work.
I know.
Okay.
That's why I'm still working.
Yeah. Number 2 is number 25, intermediate. Share a time when you felt you made a very important decision.
I think the biggest decision I made was when I was a university professor. I was tenured and I decided to leave because it was a toxic environment, and I left without a job. And I basically gave up tenure. I was 35 years old. I could have been a university professor the rest of my life. And I realized that the system was too hard to change. And as a white woman, I did not feel valued. And it was like, I don't need to do this. And I felt like it took a lot of, I was single, all of that, and it took a lot of courage.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Good job. Interesting could be related. So third lightning round, number 44 is deep. If you could tell your younger self something, what would it be? How would you share the information? And when would you do it?
Wow. I think my younger self was often trying to prove that I was okay and prove to myself that I was smart enough and good enough and all of that. So I think I would have early on really, besides all the therapy I had to do and pay for a lot of that, really listening to the fact that I was really enough. And I think a lot of women struggle with this, that I was really enough and that I didn't have to prove myself all the time. That really accepting and honoring who I was and what I brought, and to listen to the messages I was getting from the world instead of dismissing them or finding some rationalization about why that wasn't true. And I think that a lot of women struggle with that in terms of, how we grew up or trying to fulfill somebody else's needs instead of being clear about who we are and what we need for ourselves.
Absolutely. That is like the crux of all of my work. Thank you so much for being with me, or us, or people who are watching this. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Best is Judith Katz at kjcg.com. And I'm always willing to answer questions, respond to people, email, phone, whatever. But my thing, we're all busy people, but I always say I can always make space for people. I feel like that's part of it. So happy to connect. And I'm so happy you're doing this, Jessica.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for being a part of it. It's been great.
Thanks so much.